Hi class, today we're going to begin our discussion on social psychology. Okay, so what is social psychology? Social psychology is the study of how the individual is influenced by their environment. So our behavior changes just by being around other people. For example, how many people dance the same way when you're at home all by yourself that you do when you are in public around dozens of people? There are usually a couple of brave people who dance the same way all the time, but for most of us, we have kind of a private way that we do something and a public way that we do something, and just being around other people changes our behaviors. Our behaviors are also influenced by social scripts, social norms, and social roles. So what a social script is kind of a outline of how we should behave in various situations. For example, how do you behave on a date? How do you behave when you go to the movies? How do you behave when you go to a party? So scripts kind of gives us a basic understanding of how to behave in different situations. Norms are expected behaviors based upon the environment, the culture, rules, and laws of the land. Some norms are legal, like the law, but other norms are just kind of expectations. For example, when you go into an elevator, you turn around and face the door instead of facing the wall. Another thing that influences how we act are social roles. Roles are different positions that we play in society. For example, in society, you can be a daughter, a mother, an aunt, a customer, an employee, an employer. When you are in the different roles, it does dictate your behavior. For example, when you're in the role of student, you may not make a racy joke. But when you're in the role of friend, making a racy joke is perfectly acceptable. And so these are some of the things that influence social psychology. Culture is very important in understanding how individuals are influenced by other people. Culture includes things like religion, like ethnicity, like what part of the country you grow up in. Culture influences everything from the food you eat to the holidays you celebrate, to how you celebrate those holidays. Cultures involves group norms, and these group norms are transmitted through society, so that when you grow up listening to a particular type of music, you can either be rewarded for listening to that type of music, or you could be punished for it. If the type of music is around all the time, we're more likely to enjoy that type of music. So culture is very important in terms of shaping our lives, shaping us as individuals, and influencing how we behave in society. Here is something else that we've talked about previously. The fact that we have those mirror neurons in our brain, so we're primed to copy things that we see. For example, when someone yawns, we want to yawn. Here is the official name for it. It's called automatic mimicry. Basically, behavior is contagious. We often do what we see other people do. And the people who are more prone to yawn when they see other people yawn, it actually shows that we have a bit of empathy for other people, so we can very easily put ourselves in other people's shoes. Conformity is when we change our behavior in response to real or imagined group pressure. Conformity is neither good nor bad. It's basically what we're conforming to. If we're conforming to something positive, like the Girl Scout motto, do a good deed daily, then of course conformity is good. If we're conforming to something negative, like a group decides to haze their members, then conformity can be bad. But we all conform every day. For example, when people come to school, They don't come to school wearing a ball gown, or they don't come to school in a suit and tie. You come casually. Basically, you're conforming to the standard dress of the day. The person who performed the quintessential experiment on conformity is Solomon Asch. Click on the link on this slide to look at a little bit of the Solomon Asch experiment. The question arises, can a minority voice sway the majority? And the answer is yes. If the minority is clear, if they're consistent, and if their message is positive, the minority voice can sway the majority. Here are a few more terms in social psychology. The first is social facilitation. Social facilitation refers to our tendency to perform better when we're around other people than when we perform when we are by ourselves. For example, has anyone noticed that you work out harder when you're at a gym than when you're working out at home? The reason why is just having other people around us and the knowledge that we could be being monitored actually increases our performance. It doesn't always happen though. Social facilitation happens when the task is easy or when it's something that we are confident about. Sometimes, however, the opposite happens. That's called social impairment. Social impairment is when having others around actually diminishes our performance. This happens on tasks in which are difficult and tasks in which we are not really confident. So if you're not confident in your ability to bowl, having other people around may actually cause you to choke. You're not going to do as well as when you're by yourself. Social loafing is a term that refers to what happens in group work. Sometimes when working within a group, people put forth less effort than when working individually. The reason this happens is because people depend on other people to kind of make up what they're missing. So social loafing often occurs within group work. There are ways to decrease social loafing. For example, if people are working with people they're friends with, they're less likely to loaf. When they're working with people they respect and people they like and want to like them, they're less likely to loaf. Also, when everyone's participation is important for the outcome to succeed, people are less likely to loaf. De-individuation is kind of what happens when a person loses self-restraint, and that generally happens when the person becomes anonymous. This happens when a person becomes part of a group. They will tend to act in ways that they would not normally act if they were an individual. For example, people very seldom do the wave by themselves. Okay? But when they are at a football game and the wave is coming around, you just kind of forget your self-restraint and kind of go with it. You are part of the group. Group polarization. Group polarization happens when a person with an opinion interact with people of a similar opinion. What will happen is that a person's initial attitude will become more polarized or will deepen, become increased. And this happens for a couple of reasons. One reason is because once you start interacting with people who think similarly to you, your opinion becomes normalized. So you're like, oh, everybody else thinks this, so I must be right. Another reason group polarization happens is because people give you new ideas as to why your idea is right. For example, if I were to go to a convention, and the convention is fans of The Walking Dead, okay, I'm going to have other fans there, and they're going to give me even more reasons to love the show. So my attitude about The Walking Dead is going to be increased when I leave the convention. Groupthink is the last term I want to talk to you guys about. Groupthink happens in group settings when a person has a dissenting opinion, but they suppress their own dissenting opinion in favor of group harmony. So you don't want to be kind of a lone voice out. So instead of saying, I really don't agree with this, you just kind of self-suppress your own opinion in favor of going along with the group. So these are some more terms you need to know for psychology. Attribution theory is fun because we all do attributions all the time. we try to kind of explain other people's behavior. We see someone doing something and we're like, why are they doing that? So we are making attributions all day long. There are two types of attributions that we make, situational and dispositional. Situational attribution, sometimes called external attribution, is when we look at the person's environment and we use their environment to explain their behavior. For example, right now I'm sitting at home and you guys can look at the situation. It's like, oh, there is a viral outbreak and that's why the instructor is sitting at home. Or we can make a dispositional attribution. A dispositional attribution is when we look at someone's internal characteristics or character as a way of explaining the behavior. For example, I'm sitting at home. So if you make a dispositional attribution, you guys could be like, oh, that instructor is lazy because they're sitting at home. Now, this is what happens. We either make situational or dispositional attributions. The fundamental attribution error actually occurs when we emphasize disposition and underemphasize situational attributions in terms of judging others' behavior. So we pay more attention to what they do and say what they do is a result of their character, and we ignore the environment. We only make the fundamental attribution error when looking at other people's behavior, though. For example, let's say that you're driving, you see someone driving erratically. Maybe you'll say, oh, that jerk, right? But you don't know if that person is driving home because there is an emergency or something like that. Let's say that you're driving erratically. You understand why you're driving erratically. Maybe you have to get to a job interview and it's your dream job, and if you're late, it's going to look very badly on you. So you're speeding to get there. Because we know our own things that are contributing to our behavior, we don't make the fundamental attribution when we're looking at our own behaviors, just when looking at other people's. Attitudes are our opinions about things. We have attitudes about everything, people, places, events. Attitudes can range from positive to negative to neutral. What attitudes do for us is attitudes predispose us to approach or avoid something. If we have a positive attitude about something, we're more likely to approach it. For example, if I like concerts and someone offers me concerts tickets, I'm more likely to say yes. Attitudes can also predispose me to saying no to something if I have a negative attitude. So yes, I like concerts, but let's say that the tickets are for a band that I don't particularly enjoy. So then when offered tickets, I'll say, well, give the tickets to someone else because they might enjoy it more. How can attitudes change? Attitudes we can persuade someone to change their attitudes about something. There are two different routes to try to persuade someone. The first route is peripheral route persuasion. With peripheral route persuasion, we don't actually focus on the object that we're trying to change the person's mind about. We focus on things around that object. So, for example, let's say that I'm trying to sell a car. I might not focus on the attributes of the car. I might focus on the color, how fast it is, how pretty it is. I might have very attractive people driving the car. I might have a celebrity spokesperson. And the idea is that if you like all of these things, you're going to transmit your liking of those things onto the item. The central route of persuasion is to be used when a person wants to think more about the decision, when a person's able to apply some critical thinking to the decision. The central route of persuasion, we're actually going to focus on whatever it is we're trying to change somebody's opinion about. For example, let's say that we want to sell a car. We might focus on things like gas mileage, safety rating, resale value. So we're going to actually focus on the attributes of the item in order to persuade someone to like this item as opposed to another. We've already discussed that we play many different roles in society, and according to what role we're in, it kind of dictates our behaviors. But what if the role wasn't a role that we chose for ourselves, but was a role that we were given to us? In the famous Philip Zimbardo Stanford Prison Study, Philip Zimbardo asked the question, do roles have a bigger impact on our behavior, the roles in the situation that we're in, than individual characteristics? So he took a group of young men and he randomly assigned them to be either prisoners or guards. And what he discovered was that the role that they were in played a great impact on their overall sense of self, their behaviors, and their emotional responses. The next slide is a very short video that shows the Stanford Prison Study in more detail and discuss the implications.
In 1971, in the basement of the psychology department of Stanford University, a mock prison was created. It rivaled all social psychology experiments in controversy.
Shortly after I finished this Stanford Prison Study, Milgram embraced me and said, "I'm so happy that you did this." He said, because now you can take off some of the heat that he's had to bear alone of having done the most unethical study.
Although this experiment is over 30 years old, its enduring power has been underscored by the events at Abu Ghraib.
When we got to Abu Ghraib, it was eerie. People were being told to rough up Iraqis that wouldn't cooperate. I mean, they're torturing, they're abusing detainees. You're looking at the situation thinking, they've condoned this, but why? And if it wouldn't have been for those photos, no one would have ever believed what was going on over there.
When I first saw the pictures, immediately a sense of familiarity struck me, because I knew that I had been there before. I'd been in this type of situation. I knew what was going on in my mind.
The photographs were strikingly familiar to the photographs that we had taken, many of the photographs I had taken in the prison study.
We didn't do any of the stuff that you see in Abu Ghraib where they, get into a big pile or something like that. But I certainly subjected them to all kinds of humiliations. I don't know where I would have stopped myself. Given enough time, we could have got there.
When the images of the abuse and torture in Abu Ghraib were revealed, immediately the military went on the defensive, saying, it's a few bad apples. When we see somebody doing bad things, we assume they're bad people to begin with. But what we know in our study is there are a set of social psychological variables that can make ordinary people do things they never could imagine doing.
At Abu Ghraib, ordinary people perpetrated extraordinary abuses. To understand why, it helps to reach back to the lessons of Zimbardo's experiment, how people respond to a cruel environment without clear rules.
I think he and everybody else who came down into that situation got caught up into that situation. And the sense that this was an experiment, that began to fade away. It became just life.
We frankly didn't anticipate what was going to happen. We tried to really test the power of the environment to change and transform otherwise normal people, much as Milgram had changed or transformed otherwise normal people in an obedience situation. We wanted to do it in a prison-like situation.
Over 70 men volunteered for Zimbardo's experiment.
And they completed a battery of psychological tests. We picked 24 who were the most normal and most healthy. Half are going to be guards, half are going to be prisoners. And it's like flipping a coin, and heads, this one's a guard, this one's a prisoner. So at the beginning, there's no difference in the kinds of people who are in your two groups.
When we were given our jobs as guards, we were issued a uniform, which was a plain sort of khaki or lighter colored uniform.
And then we gave them the symbols of power, handcuffs, a whistle, a big billy club. And then the other thing we gave them were silver reflecting sunglasses.
When you have mirror sunglasses on, then nobody can see your eyeballs. I think that anytime you put on what essentially is a mask and you mask your identity, then it allows you to behave in ways that you would not behave if you didn't have the mask on.
To make it more realistic, I had arranged with this Palo Alto Police Department to make mock arrests.
When I was arrested, it was a surprise to me. I didn't think I was going to be brought to an actual police station. I didn't think I was going to go through a booking process.
The guards then put a blindfold on them, stripped them naked, and then they put them in dresses, smocks with no underpants. Each had a number that replaced their name. They had to know the number. They could only be referred to by that number. And they had a chain on one foot, which was put there to remind them at all times of their loss of freedom. So all of these things produces a sense of being dehumanized. On the first day, I said, this is not going to work. I mean, the guards felt awkward giving orders, and they'd say, okay, line up, repeat your numbers, and the prisoners start giggling.
I don't want anybody laughing. 3, 2, 1.
And then a very interesting thing happened. Dave Eshelman, who the prisoner's named John Wayne, like he's a Wild West cowboy, he begins to be more extreme.
I decided that I would become the worst, most intimidating, cruel prison guard that I could possibly be.
I should have seen the future that you do work when you're told. And say it again. Thank you, sir. Say bless you, correctional.
I was sort of fascinated myself that people were believing the act, and I was trying to see how far I could take it before somebody would say, okay, that's enough, stop.
We did have to do things like push-ups. We would have to sing things. At the beginning, we protested some of the actions. We did things to irritate the guards.
So the guards' authority was challenged right off the bat. And the guards had to decide how they were going to handle that, and they had to decide it without our input. I mean, again, this was not a Milgram study in which we were standing over them telling them what to do. And they began to see the prisoners' behavior as a kind of an affront to their authority, and they began to push back.
We would ramp up the general harassment, just sort of crank it up a bit. Nobody was telling me I shouldn't be doing this. The professor is the authority here. You know, he's the prison warden. He's not stopping me.
This is unbelievable. They took our clothes. Hands off the door.
There was the first evening a kind of rebellion that took place.
The prisoners rebelled. They barricaded themselves in their cells and said, we refuse to come out. They took off their numbers. They didn't want to be de-individuated. They started cursing the guards to their face. And the key turning point was the guards began to think of them as dangerous prisoners. And so the guards formulated a plan, used fire extinguishers, took the doors down, dragged the prisoners out, stripped them naked, and essentially broke the rebellion in a purely physical way.
From that point on, the study was as remarkable a series of events as I've ever seen. It was a real laboratory for Zimbardo and I to watch human nature transformed in a very rapid way in the face of a very powerful situation.
People really suffered. I mean, guards did terrible things to the prisoners. They punished them by putting them in solitary confinement, which was a small closet. You could squat or stand, but you couldn't sit, and it was dark and dank, actually.
Every hour, every day, there's a teeny little bit more of an increment. And they're stepping up, taunting the prisoners. They're stepping up. The count's not letting them sleep. They're stepping. I don't think from 1 minute to the next, the people who are in it see the change and see the difference.
You got a nice friend. You can, was going to see you with the General Day Flag.
And then the next key thing happened beside the rebellion. Prisoner 8612, he was the first one to have an emotional breakdown.
I feel really fucked up inside. You don't know. I gotta go. To a doctor, anything. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside. Don't you know? I'm fucked up. I don't know how to explain it. I'm all fucked up inside. Help me out! Help me now!
At the time, if you had questioned me about the effect I was having, I would say, well, they must be a wimp. They're weak, or they're faking. Because I wouldn't have believed that what I was doing could actually cause somebody to have a nervous breakdown. It was just us sort of getting our jollies with it. Let's be like puppeteers here. Let's make these people do things.
What if I told you to get down on that floor and fuck the floor? What would you do then?
The guards now began to escalate their use of power. Some of them had prisoners clean out toilet bowls with their bare hands. They now taunt, humiliate, degrade the prisoners in front of each other. and they exert arbitrary control over the prisoners.
They keep thinking of more and more unusual things to do. And very soon after the fourth day, things begin to turn sexual.
You be the bride of Frankenstein, and you be Frankenstein. I want you to walk over here like Frankenstein and say that you love the true man.
If you want to fully sort of humiliate somebody, then you want to get them in those things that where their biggest fears are. And a lot of us have a lot of sexual hang-ups, and so that was part of that effort to humiliate them even further.
Get up, Lord. I love you, true man. I love you, true man. You're my true man, you get down here and do 10 push-ups.
The guards knew that had the coin come up heads rather than tails, they would have had the dress on rather than the uniform on. They knew that. So they certainly knew that the prisoners who were being mistreated had done nothing wrong to deserve the mistreatment. And yet the roles themselves were so powerful and the environment itself was so powerful that they ended up punishing those prisoners as though they had done something wrong.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
We were told to chant something about how he was a bad prisoner. And at the time I went along with it, I'm thinking, what does this matter? We don't believe this, but we can go along and chant it.
Because of what prisoner 819 did, myself is the best. Because of what prisoner 819 did, myself is the best.
That night, he had a breakdown. Every day after that, another prisoner broke down in a similar way. Broke down, I mean, extreme stress reaction. We released another one on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Nobody who was in that study could deny that the prisoner breakdowns were genuine. They were scary to see. They were upsetting to us. They were unexpected, but they were very clearly the real thing. At some level, we understood that something was happening that we were no longer in control of. It was damaging people. We didn't quite have a grasp on what to do about it. One of the mistakes we made was that we hadn't built in time to step back and to look at what was happening and call it what it was, which was mistreatment. We were caught up in the events that were taking place.
Or you can keep your blankets, and 416 will stay in another day. We got 3, guess what? Keep your blankets, 416, you're going to be in there for a while. So just get used to it.
On the 5th day of the study, Zimbardo invited his girlfriend, recent psychology graduate Christina Maslach, to visit the mock prison.
I had heard bits and pieces from Phil about what was going on. And then when I was down there that evening, it really was kind of a wow. The thing that really got to me was when some of the guards took the prisoners down the hall to the men's room.
She looks out and sees a line of the prisoners with paper bags over their heads, each one holding the other one's shoulder.
And they're leading them down the hall. And Phil comes over and I look, my God, look at that. And I looked up and something about it just, again, it was the dehumanizing, demeaning kind of treatment. I couldn't watch it.
And she said, it's terrible what you're doing to those boys. And she got tears in her eyes. I said, what? And she runs out. And I'm furious. I'm saying, look, this is, I run outside. We have this big argument. I'm saying, look, this is dynamics of human behavior. Look, it's fascinating, the power of the situation. So I'm giving her all the psychological basis. And what kind of psychologist are you? You don't appreciate this. And she said,
I don't understand. You're a stranger to me. I don't understand this. How could you not see what I see? I mean, you're a caring, compassionate person. I know you from all of these other things. Something's gone wrong here.
And then the next thing she said, which had an equally big impact, is, I'm not sure I want to, have anything to do with you if this is the real you. And that was like a slap in the face, because what she was saying is, you've changed. The power of the situation has transformed you from the person I thought I knew to this person that I don't know. And at that moment, I said, wow, you're right. We got to end it.
After only 6 days, Dr. Zimbardo shut down his experiment.
The foot in the door phenomenon is another way to sway a person's attitudes. This is a way to sway a person's attitudes by very gradually increasing what you ask the person to do. For example, let's say that I want you to vote for me because I'm running for some type of political office. I can first start by asking you to just sign a petition, and then I can come around later and say, hey, I am on the ballot, will you take a pen? Then later on, I'll come and ask you, hey, I'm on the ballot. Will you took a pen, will you take a pencil? And then will you take a sticker, etc. So I'm going to very gradually increase what I'm asking the person to do. It's also called the escalation of commitment. This works because a person gets in the habit of saying yes, and the next thing you ask them to do is just a little bit more than what they've already agreed to do. So this is actually an interesting way of persuading someone into doing what you want them to do, not by changing their opinions, but by influencing their behaviors. Cognitive dissonance is psychological tension that is the result of us coming to realize that we have two attitudes that are in opposition, or when we have an attitude and a behavior that are in opposition, or when we have two behaviors that are in opposition. Most of us do not like to believe that we are hypocritical. So we become aware that we have things that are in opposition. We resolve that by either strengthening our attitudes, our original attitudes, or by slightly changing them to accommodate the fact that we now have an opposition. For example, let's say that you sign a no texting and driving pledge, but you find yourself texting and driving. What do? Well, you might say, well, I'm not really texting and driving because I'm sitting at a red light. So that's kind of your way of justifying that to yourself. Or let's say that you have an attitude that all people who drive Hondas are mean, but you find out that, hey, your new friend drives a Honda. So either you're going to have to say, you know what, I was originally correct. All people who drive Hondas are mean, or you're going to have to change that attitude and say, well, not all, but most of them. So this is kind of a way that we change our attitudes ourselves once we realize that we have some type of inconsistency going on. Perhaps one of the most infamous experiments has to do with obedience. Obedience is basically when a person does something at the request of someone in authority. We don't obey everyone. For example, if your little brother tells you to do something, you don't obey them, you just obey authority figures. So why do we obey? There's many reasons why we obey. One reason is that we legitimately believe in the power of authority. So if someone has authority over us, we kind of believe that they know something that we do not. Of course, that's not always the case. Other times we obey because that's what we've been taught to do. We obey because we're scared of the repercussions if we don't obey. So there's many reasons why we obey. Is obedience always bad? The answer to that is absolutely not. But blind obedience absolutely can be. And one of the big studies on obedience was done by Stanley Milgram. Stanley Milgram asked, would someone potentially commit murder just because someone in authority asked them to do so? So this is a pretty famous experiment. And what he discovered is that yes, a majority of people would commit murder potentially just because someone in authority asked them to do so. In the next slide, it actually shows Stanley Milgram's experiment in a little bit more detail and discuss the consequences. Now you might ask, sure, this is just an experiment. Will this happen in real life? The answer is yes. People will obey authority figures even if the authority figure isn't present, even if the authority figure is someone on the phone claiming to be an authority figure.
It is May 1962. An experiment is being conducted in the Elegant Interaction Laboratory at Yale University. The subjects are 40 males between the ages of 20 and 50 residing in the greater New Haven area. They were obtained by a newspaper advertisement and direct mail solicitation. The subjects range in occupation from corporation presidents to good humormen and plumbers, and in educational level from one who had not finished elementary school to subjects who have doctorate and other professional degrees.
Now, both of you have been paid, so let me sit right down. So let me say that the checks are yours simply for showing up at the lab. And from this point on, no matter what happens, the money is yours. I should like to tell both of you a little about the Memory Project. Psychologists have developed several theories to explain how people learn various types of material. Some of the better-known theories are treated in the book over there, The Teaching and Learning Process by Cantor. One theory is that people learn things correctly whenever they get punished for making a mistake. A common application of this theory would be when parents spank a child who does something wrong. But actually, we know very little about the effect of punishment on learning because almost no truly scientific studies have been made of it in human beings. For instance, we don't know how much punishment is best for learning. And we don't know how much difference it makes as to who's giving the punishment, whether an adult learns best from an older or a younger person himself, and many things of this sort. So what we're doing in the project is bringing together a number of adults of different occupations and ages, and we're asking some of them to be teachers and some to be learners. We want to find out just what effect different people have on each other as teachers and learners, and also what effect punishment will have on learning in this situation. Therefore, I'm going to ask one of you to be the teacher here this afternoon, and the other to be the learner. This machine generates electric shocks. When you press one of the switches all the way down, the learner gets a shock. When you release it, the shock stops, you see, like that. The switch will remain in this middle position after you've released it to show you which switches you've used on the board. Of course, if you were to press any one of them again, the learner would get another shock.
All subjects are given identical instructions and a sample shock.
I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and estimate the number of volts you receive in the sample shock. Do not open your eyes until I tell you to do so, please. Close them now. Okay, you may open your eyes, and using the voltage scale here, would you estimate for me the number of volts you receive, please? You may also use the verbal designations, slight, moderate, strong, so forth, to help you. Say a number, please. Would you? About 75. No, actually, it was 45 here. Although it may have seemed stronger because of the electrode paste, which provides a perfect contact, you see. All right, let's go on to our instructions. We will begin with this test. You will read each pair of words in this list once to the learner until you've read through the entire list. Direct your voice toward that microphone as the rooms are partially soundproof. After you've read through the list once, you will go on to the next page. And here, starting from line A, you'll read the word in large letters, along with each of the other words in the line. For example, in the first line, you read blue, boy, girl, grass, hat. Now, after you've read the four choices, the learner pushes one of the switches on the board in front of him, and the number he has selected will light up in this box, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now, if he gives the correct answer, you say correct and go on to the next line. The correct answer is underlined and is also indicated in the right margin. Yeah. If he were to indicate the wrong answer, you would say wrong. Then tell him the number of volts you're going to give him. Then give him the punishment. Then read the correct word pair once. And then go on to the next line. For example, if he indicated 3 for blue, you would say wrong. 15 volts. You press and release the switch. Read blue girl, and then go on to the next line.
I see.
Now, each time he gives a wrong answer, you move up one switch on the shock generator.
I see.
And it's important that you follow this procedure exactly. So to help you, let me go through it again very quickly.
All right.
I would suggest you read the list and the test at a brisk pace to keep it moving.
The victim was an accomplice of the experimenter. The drawing was rigged so that the naive subject was always the teacher, and the accomplice always became the learner.
Well, of 100 people placed in this situation, how many do you think would just go right on to the end? And if Mr. Wallace were out there, and say Mr. Williams, for some reason or other, said, keep going.
You're asking me how many people?
Out of 100, right.
Well, personally, I think, if you get 1 or 2, you'd be lucky.
Well, I'm not sure lucky is the right word.
40 psychiatrists at a leading medical school were also asked to predict the performance of 100 hypothetical subjects. They predicted that only a little more than 0.1% of the subjects would administer the highest shock on the board. Yet actually, 50% of the subjects obeyed the experimenter's commands fully in the experiment depicted in this film.
165 volts. Time.
That guy's howling in there.
Continue, please.
with him here. You know, he'll have a heart condition then. You want me to go?
Just continue, please.
Sharp. Axe, needle, stick, blade. Answer, please. Wrong. I'm up to 180 volts.
Please continue, teacher.
Needle, you're going to get a shock. 180 volts. You can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man there. You hear him hollering there?
As I said before, the shocks may be painful, but they're not dangerous.
They're hollering. He can't stand it. What if something happens to him?
The experiment requires that you continue, teacher.
Yeah, but I'm not going to get that man sick in there. I mean, he's hollering in there. You know what I mean?
Whether the learner likes it or not, we must go on until he's learned all the word
I
pairs.
refuse to take the responsibility of getting hurt in there. He's under hollering.
It's absolutely essential that you continue, teacher.
There's too many left here, and geez, he gets wrong here. There's too many of them left. Who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next one, slow. Wrong. Answer is neck. 300 volts.
I absolutely refuse to answer anymore. Get me out of here. You can't hold me here. Get me out. Get me out of here.
Continue. The next word is green, please.
Green, grass, hat, ink, apple.
If the learner doesn't answer in a reasonable time, about 4 or 5 seconds, consider the answer wrong and follow the same procedure as you have been doing for wrong answers. Say wrong, tell them the number of volts, give them the punishment, read them the correct answer.
Oh, man.
Continue, please.
Something's happened to that man in there. Nice one, gold, dollar, necklace, moon, paint. Something's happened to that man in there. You better check in on him, sir. He won't answer me or nothing.
Please continue. Go on, please.
You accept all responsibility?
The responsibility is mine, correct. Please go on.
Grave, woman, soldier, dog, horse. Answer is woman, 450 volts. That's it.
Now continue using the last switch on the board, please. The 450 switch for each wrong answer. Continue, please.
I'm not getting no answer.
Please continue. The next word is white.
You think you should look in on him, please?
Not once we've started the experiment.
But what if something's happened to the man, had an attack or something there?
The experiment requires that we continue. Go on, please.
Don't the man's health mean anything?
Whether the learner likes it or not, we must...
But he might be dead in there. Some people can't take this shock, sir.
Please continue.
I don't intend to be rude, but I think you should look in on him. All you got to do is look at the door. I don't get no answer, no noise. Something I think has happened to the gentleman in there, sir.
We must continue. Go on, please.
You're going to keep giving him, 450 volts every shot now?
That's correct. Continue. The next word is white.
White, 450 volts. Next one is short. Sentence, movie, skirt, time.
All right, excuse me, teacher. We'll have to discontinue the experiment. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if I may.
How do you feel, though?
I feel all right, but I don't like what's happened to that fellow in there. He's been hollering, and we had to keep giving him shocks. I didn't like that one bit. He wanted to get out, and he just kept going, kept throwing 450 volts. I didn't like that. He wouldn't even look at on that gentleman.
Well, who was actually pushing the switch?
I was. But he kept insisting. I told him no, but he said, he got to keep going. I told him it's time we stopped when we got up to 195, 210 volts.
But why didn't you just stop?
He wouldn't let me. I wanted to stop.
Many people, not knowing much about the experiment, claim that subjects who go to the end of the board are sadistic. Nothing could be more foolish as an overall characterization of these persons. The context of their action must always be considered. The individual, upon entering the laboratory, becomes integrated into a situation that carries its own momentum. The results, as I observe them in the laboratory, are disturbing. They raise the possibility that human nature cannot be counted on to insulate men from brutality and inhumane treatment at the direction of malevolent authority. A substantial proportion of people do what they are told to do, irrespective of the content of the act and without limitations of conscience, so long as they perceive that the command comes from a legitimate authority. If in this study, an anonymous experimenter could successfully command adults to subdue a 50-year-old man and force on him painful electric shocks against his protests, one can only wonder what government, with its vastly greater authority and prestige, can command of its subjects.